up on Arirang News. President Yoon kicks off his second day in Switzerland and is the first South Korean president to take part in the Davos Forum in 9 years. He focuses on economic and sales diplomacy, meeting with business leaders of multinational companies. At the annual gathering of World Economic Forum in Davos, the European Union pitches its new green law, rivaling United States Inflation Reduction Act. Also in Davos, Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska delivers a special address calling for unity and recognition of the human suffering due to the war. The parliamentary probe into last Halloween's Itaewon crowd crush ended yesterday, but opposition parties are calling for the launch of an independent body to further investigate who's to blame. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea, and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. South Korean President Yoon is now in Switzerland on the second leg of his 8-day two-nation tour to attend the World Economic Forum 2023. There, he is expected to continue his economic and sales diplomacy, first by meeting with the CEOs of global corporations. Our top office bureau chief, Moon reports.
President Yoon kicks off his second day of his 4-day visit to Switzerland with a trip to the alpine town of Davos to attend this year's annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, the first South Korean president to take part in the Davos Forum in 9 years. Seoul's top office said the second leg of the president's 8-day two-nation tour will also be largely focused on revitalizing the economy.
정부가 나서서 기업 혼자 뚫기 어려운 시장을 또 같이 뚫어내는 것이 그게 기업을 지원하는 것이고 정부가 해야 될 일이라고 생각합니다.
First up on his itinerary in Davos Platz is a luncheon with the CEOs of major multinational corporations such as Samsung Electronics, SK, Hyundai Motor Group, as well as JP Morgan, IBM, and Intel. There, South Korea's top salesman is expected to introduce his administration's private market-driven economic policy direction and promote investment in South Korea. Mr. Yoon will also play his role as the nation's top diplomat to garner support for South Korea's bid to host the World Expo in the nation's southeastern port city of Busan in 2030. This at the Korean Night function held on the sidelines of the Davos Forum. His trip to Davos also includes a special address to the World Economic Forum by the South Korean president, where he is expected to propose international cooperation and solidarity for global supply chain resilience and transition to clean energy. Before taking off for Switzerland in Dubai, the South Korean president vowed all-out efforts to promote South Korea's excellent investment climate and work towards economic revitalization by expanding exports. With China back on the global stage with a delegation to the Davos Forum to assure foreign investors that a 3-year hiatus in which the pandemic cut off its country from the rest of the world is over, the race has already begun in the snow-covered resort town, with countries competing in investment support to gain dynamic comparative advantage. Moon Arirang News.
Also in Davos, the European Union responds to the United States Inflation Reduction Act with its own plans for a green package. The head of the European Commission put forth a plan to mobilize state aid and a sovereignty fund to keep firms from moving to the U.S. Jung Eun-ju with the details.
The first day of official programming at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos started on Tuesday with bold declarations by Europe. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said the EU was drafting a new law for its green industries and would back it up with state aid and a European sovereignty fund to keep firms from moving to the United States.
We will put forward a new Net Zero Industry Act. This will follow the same model as our CHIPS Act. The new Net Zero Industry Act will identify clear goals for European clean tech by 2030.
The head of the European Commission said the moves would be part of the EU's Green Deal industrial plan to make Europe the home of clean technology and industrial innovation on the road to net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. The announcement comes just months after the United States launched its own Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which was approved in August. The U.S. legislation includes a record $369 billion in spending on climate and energy policies. The EU has since expressed concern about the design of the financial incentives in the package and that more European companies might move to the United States. In her speech, von der Leyen highlighted the EU's continuing commitment to free trade and refrained from criticizing the United States despite the strain the IRA has caused between the US and the EU. She did not give any details about the European Sovereignty Fund, an idea she first raised in September, which does not yet have the support of all EU governments, notably Germany. The United States has also not yet guaranteed it will give European companies the access they want to the IRA's financial incentives. Von der Leyen further stressed the need to work and trade with China on clean tech and push for a level playing field. 정은주, Arirang News.
At this year's Davos Forum, Ukraine's First Lady took to the podium to call for global support in easing pain and restoring peace in our country. Lee Seung-jae covers her remarks.
Speaking to world leaders and corporate executives at the Davos Forum on Tuesday, Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska pressed world leaders and corporate executives at the World Economic Forum's annual gathering to do more to help Ukraine.
The war is causing great suffering, and it is playing a decisive role in the global development of democracy. That is why great solidarity shown by democratic countries with Ukraine is crucial.
She also stressed that many people in the country are starving because of the prolonged war, adding that the country has the longest bread lines in the world. The First Lady also noted that one of the main goals in the near future is to finally put an end to the war that's now nearing its one-year anniversary.
We have to pronounce an end to this war. Not only so we have a date, but so that we can reset the time and start counting peacetime, because peace does not equal a truce.
Meanwhile, during the Davos Forum on Tuesday, Andriy Yermak, the Ukrainian president's chief of staff, said more than 9,000 civilians, including 453 children, have been killed in Ukraine since the start of Russia's invasion. He says that such action against the Ukrainian people will not be forgiven and that each criminal will be held responsible. The Ukrainian official added that Ukraine wants a special international tribunal to try Russian political leaders and reparations for the destruction caused by the invasion. The comments come as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said Monday that more than 7,000 civilians had been killed in Ukraine since Russia invaded, while the true number is likely to be much higher. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
At least 18 people have died and 29 have been injured in a helicopter crash near Kyiv, Ukraine. For reasons yet unclear, the aircraft crashed Tuesday near a nursery, killing 9 on the ground, including 3 children. On board the aircraft was Ukraine's interior minister, the highest-ranking government official to die since Russia's invasion. 15 of the injured were also children. Local authorities have called off the search for survivors, with around 20 people missing under the rubble. Witnesses said that the aircraft came spinning down from the sky on fire. President Volodymyr Zelensky called the accident a terrible tragedy. Here on the local front, health officials will make public their decisions on the fate of indoor mask requirements this coming Friday. Our Shin Se-byuk has the latest.
The South Korean government is set to decide the timeline for almost completely ending the indoor mask mandate this Friday as the 7th COVID-19 wave subsides. This is according to Interior Minister Lee Sang-min during the government's virus response meeting on Wednesday.
With this winter's COVID-19 wave past its peak, the overall virus situation is stabilizing.
The indoor mask mandate is the last remaining antivirus measure left in the country. Last month, the government announced a 2-phase plan to scrap the indoor mask mandate. In the first phase, mask wearing would no longer be required, but rather recommended in public places except for high-risk facilities such as hospitals and public transportation. And this would only be possible if 2 out of 4 criteria were met. The criteria include a stable number of new infections, a downtrend in critically ill cases and death, sufficient medical response capabilities, and a boost in the vaccination rate among people aged 60 years old and above, as well as those working in or residing at high-risk facilities. As of now, 3 out of these 4 requirements have been met, with the exception of the booster take-up by older people. In the second phase, the mandate would be completely lifted for all places. While some speculated that indoor mask restrictions would be eased as soon as after the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday, it's now widely expected that the new policy will be implemented at the end of the month due to uncertainties such as the current situation in China. One expert, meanwhile, says the most important thing to consider now is the country's capability to handle a health crisis rather than when the mandate is dropped.
When to downgrade the indoor mask mandate to a recommendation isn't important. We should now think about whether the country's medical system is really ready for and capable enough to handle the situation if things go bad all of a sudden.
As for the prospect of future infections after the lifting of restrictions, medical experts believe figures would stay at around the current level. 신세벽, Arirang News.
New findings show corporate Korea are making substantial efforts to ensure a sustainable and socially responsible environment for businesses. In fact, the country's top 100 firms by sales invested over $4 billion last year to fight pollution and secure worker safety. Yoon tells us more.
The Federation of Korean Industries is the lobby for family-controlled conglomerates in South Korea. Their report released on Wednesday shows that South Korea's top 100 companies by sales invested over $4 billion in 2022 to combat pollution and promote workplace safety. The figure is an 87.6% increase compared to the previous year. Meanwhile, the top company's CO2 equivalent, which serves as a barometer for the effects of various greenhouse gases on the climate, came to 267.3 million tons last year, 4.7% more than a year earlier. But these companies' greenhouse gas emissions, when an increase in sales performance in 2022 is taken into consideration, actually marked a 13.5% decrease from the previous year. Leading companies like the country's #1 steelmaker POSCO say this aligns with efforts by top companies to further promote environmental, social, and governance management, as well as their pledges to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 in accordance with the government's greater plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 이은진, Arirang News.
Many small and medium-sized manufacturing firms in South Korea are turning to foreign workers due to difficulties getting Koreans to work for them. According to a survey of 1,000 manufacturing companies by the Korea Federation of SMEs, 9 out of 10 small and medium-sized firms said they hired foreign workers as Koreans wouldn't take the job. This is up roughly 15% compared to the previous year. Under the same conditions, the productivity of foreign workers with less than 3 months of employment was about 54% of that of Koreans. But foreign workers' productivity increased to 93% with more than 3 years of experience. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will be visiting Seoul in the coming weeks, with the allies' extended deterrence in the Indo-Pacific likely to top the agenda. South Korea's defense ministry says that the two sides are figuring out the dates of Austin's trip, which will likely take place after the Lunar New Year holiday. A spokesman for the U.S. Department of Defense also told reporters on Tuesday that Austin will meet with senior officials from South Korea and the Philippines during his upcoming trip. He added that the visit would mark the reaffirmation of Washington's commitment to working in concert with allies and partners to preserve a free and open Indo-Pacific. Trade between North Korea and China has increased more than threefold in a year. According to China's General Administration of Customs on Wednesday, trade back and forth between China and North Korea in 2022 amounted to more than $1 billion, a 233% jump compared to the previous year. This increase most likely has to do with train tracks reopening in January last year after being shut down in 2020. However, it still hasn't rebounded completely to pre-COVID times and is actually a 63% decrease from 2019. As a follow-up to the parliamentary probe into the Itaewon crowd crush that's now over, South Korea's opposition parties are still searching for answers. They demand launching an independent investigative body and urge dismissal of the nation's interior minister. Our National Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo has more.
South Korea's opposition parties have called for the establishment of an independent investigative body through a new special law to determine who should be held responsible for the Itaewon Halloween crowd crush and prevent such an incident from ever happening again. Opposition lawmakers gathered at the National Assembly on Wednesday for a press briefing, just a day after unilaterally adopting a final report on the parliamentary probe into the tragedy, and once again called for Interior Minister Lee Sang-min to be held responsible and dismissed.
The police didn't summon Minister Lee Sang-min, nor did they conduct a single search and seizure. He's preserved his post, absolved of any responsibility. We will hold him strictly accountable.
The ruling People Power Party have defended Lee against the opposition's allegations of dereliction of duty and professional negligence, accusing the Democratic Party of Korea of using the parliamentary probe that ended on Tuesday to remove the minister from his post.
Since day one, the opposition has had no interest in uncovering the truth or establishing prevention guidelines. They've essentially acknowledged that their goal was to prolong a political dispute by setting a trap for Minister Lee Sang-min to get him charged with perjury.
Besides an independent investigative body and Minister Lee's dismissal, the opposition are also demanding a special council probe, an apology from President Yoon Suk-yeol, the launching of a special parliamentary committee on disaster safety, and an official memorial service for those who died.
One more thing. I ask both the ruling party and its main opposition, when enacting the special law for an independent body, not to fight like little children. Be faithful to your duties as legislators. Stand up for us, the bereaved families, and the people.
Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's ambassador to Japan calls on Japanese companies to take part in compensating the Koreans they subjected to forced labor during World War II. Meanwhile, victims continue to criticize Seoul's recent proposal to resolve the issue through a third party rather than involving the responsible Japanese firms. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
About a week after the South Korean government proposed compensating the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor through a public foundation, South Korea's ambassador to Japan, Yoon Dong-min, urged the accused Japanese firms to participate in creating the fund. Speaking Wednesday to the Japanese news outlet Mainichi, he stressed that the victims are hoping for a sincere apology from the Japanese firms. He added that although South Korea cannot force those companies to apologize, voluntarily contributing to the public foundation is one way to resolve this issue. The ambassador also called for the resumption of what's known as shuttle diplomacy, in which the leaders regularly visit each other's country, a practice that has been stalled since 2011. But the government's recent proposal for public funds to compensate the forced labor victims provoked strong opposition. The victims and civic groups supporting them said this issue cannot be resolved without sincere apologies and participation from the Japanese companies. Members of civic groups gathered in front of Seoul's foreign ministry on Wednesday to protest against the plan, calling it humiliating.
The government needs to immediately get rid of their humiliating resolution on the forced labor issue and go back to where they started. This proposal does not include a sincere apology from Japan.
In a public hearing at the National Assembly last Thursday, the Foreign Ministry said it's reviewing plans to compensate the victim through a domestic fund instead of the assets of the accused Japanese firms. In landmark rulings in 2018, South Korea's Supreme Court ordered two Japanese companies, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel, to compensate the Koreans they subjected to forced labor. But so far, the companies have ignored those orders. 배은지, Arirang News.
The leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, said that he'll appear next Saturday, the 28th, for the prosecution's investigation into corruption allegations. He said Wednesday that he would confidently face the prosecutors this weekend as he intends to fulfill his political duties during the weekdays. The prosecutor summoned Lee on Monday on suspicion of corruption and breach of trust for allegedly giving illegal preferential treatment to private companies during the development of the Daejangdong neighborhood in the city of Seongnam while serving as the city mayor. He called the move a political prosecution and misuse of power. Just last week, he was questioned by the prosecution on another bribery allegation involving Seongnam Football Club. A biotech company in South Korea has built a factory that harvests plants to conduct trials for its products. The genetically edited plants are said to have played an instrumental role in developing a COVID-19 vaccine candidate. Jo Sung-min has more.
This is a plant factory owned by a South Korean biotech company. The room is set to a specific temperature and humidity that's perfect for harvesting lettuce. The lettuces are smaller than usual because they've been genetically manipulated to grow without producing any vitamin D. They'll be used to carry out product testing. Another sample that the lab grows is called benth, a close relative of tobacco. Scientists say a specific gene has been cut that usually produces toxic components, which can then be used to manufacture treatments and vaccines.
The plant's glucose structure becomes complex when protein is activated. Because it can overcreate an immune response when applied to the body, we got rid of it through genetic editing.
These plants are used to make medicines. The company developed actual COVID-19 vaccine candidates, and their findings were published in an international journal.
The results of the protein vaccine candidate made from our plants and the ones made from an insect cell came out in China last year. Ours showed more than double the efficacy rate.
While most clinical trials and biotech developments are still being conducted on animals, the company believes using plants has the potential to grow further as it's cost-effective and more convenient. The genetically edited plants are being used to develop vaccines for a rare infectious disease called Tupenia syndrome and a treatment candidate for breast cancer. Jo Sung-min, Arirang News.
The severe cold wave that swept across the nation will take a brief respite. Highs will be warm tomorrow with the entire nation seeing daytime readings in the positive range. Maximum temperatures in Seoul will be reaching 5 degrees tomorrow. With relatively warmer conditions, dust concentrations will also soar. Western Central regions, including here in Seoul, will see air quality standing in the bad category. Another round of snowfall is in store for inland regions. Eastern Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will see up to 3 centimeters. The Seoul metropolitan area, Jeollabuk-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces will see about 1 centimeter. Although snowfall accumulations are not so much, frost and ice may appear on the roads as overnight temperatures will plummet drastically. Minus figures will prevail for the morning hours. Seoul will be starting off at -5 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 5 degrees. Gwangju 7, Daejeon and Daegu will be reaching 6 degrees Celsius. On Saturday, frigid conditions will make a return with lows plunging to -10 degrees Celsius. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Wednesday night's newscast. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news in South Korea and worldwide. Take care.
This week, NAPD will meet with the first ambassador of Slovenia to Korea, Yoon Miller, to hear about